The strange gift. The sky above Outpost 7 was dark, painted with stars and dust from the nearby nebula. Inside the docking bay, lights blinked as workers loaded the last of the cargo onto a small human supply ship. Just as the captain was preparing for takeoff, the huge metal doors creaked open. A tall alien figure walked in, his robe glowing with gold thread and a long tail dragging behind him. He was the Baron of House Drex, one of the wealthiest and most feared nobles in this part of the galaxy. But today, he didn't come with soldiers or threats. He came with a box. It was large, shiny, and sealed with alien runes. Two of his guards carried it carefully, placing it in the cargo bay. "This is for the human named John Carter," the Baron said in a deep voice. "A personal gift. Make sure it reaches him untouched." The captain nodded, confused, but too afraid to ask questions. John Carter lived on a quiet planet far from war and politics. He was an ex-soldier turned engineer, now working on machines, water systems, and solar towers. Just last month, he had saved the Baron's life during a power reactor accident at a trade station. He didn't expect a thank you, and he surely didn't expect a gift. When the cargo ship landed at John's repair station, the pilot handed over the crate. It was nearly as tall as John himself. "There's something alive in there," the pilot warned. It moved during flight. John raised an eyebrow. He scanned the box for heat or weapons but found nothing dangerous. Still, he carefully opened the locks, one by one. Click, click, hiss. The top of the box opened slowly. Cold vapor escaped like smoke from dry ice. Inside, curled up and barely covered in a thin silk cloth, was an alien girl. She had violet skin with soft glowing patterns, long white hair tangled around her shoulders, and large teal eyes that were shut tight. Her hands were cuffed with glowing bands. A chain was loosely wrapped around her waist and ankles. John stepped back in shock. "What the hell?" The girl slowly opened her eyes. When she saw him, she gasped and tried to push herself against the back of the box, trembling like a frightened animal. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She just looked terrified. On top of the box was a note, sealed with the Baron's official emblem. John opened it and read, "To the brave human who saved my life, I offer this rare treasure from the finest collection. Trained, obedient, untouched, yours to command. May she serve you well. Baron Drex of the Crimson Line." John's face turned red, not from joy, but anger. This isn't a gift. This is slavery. He knelt beside the box and looked into the girl's eyes. "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "You're safe now." The girl didn't answer. She didn't even blink. John gently removed the chain from her waist. He grabbed a blanket from his bed and wrapped it around her. She didn't resist, but she kept her eyes down and her body still, like she had been punished before for moving too much. "I'm not your master," John said, sitting on the floor beside her. "You're not a thing, you're a person." Still, she stayed quiet. He made her a cup of warm broth and set it nearby. She looked at it but didn't touch it. Not until he turned away and pretended not to watch. Hours passed. John sat in his small workshop, staring at the note again. Why would the Baron give him a living person as a thank you gift? Was this common in alien nobility? What kind of world had this poor girl come from? Suddenly, a sound came from the other room. It was quiet, like a soft whimper. John rushed in. The alien girl was curled under the table, holding the blanket close. Her hands were shaking and her eyes were wet. She had started to cry. John knelt down again, speaking gently. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I promise you this. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Her lips moved, slightly, but no words came out. He reached forward slowly, and instead of touching her, he placed a small flower on the ground beside her, a sign of peace. Then he stepped back. That night, John couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of what came next. Who was she? Why was she given to him like a toy? And most important, what would he do now? One thing was clear. This gift had a soul, and she didn't belong in chains. She won't speak. The rain tapped against the window softly. Inside the room, the alien girl sat perfectly still, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. For 2 full days, she hadn't spoken a single word, not even when John asked her name. John had seen silence before, on the battlefield, in refugee camps, in hospitals. But this silence was different. It was not calm, it was not peace. It was fear, frozen into her bones. He called her many things: miss, friend, even just, hey. But the girl never reacted. She would only flinch when someone came too close or when a sound startled her. She would sleep curled in the corner of the room, knees to her chest, like she was trying to disappear. John cooked meals and placed them near her. She never ate in front of him. But in the morning, the food was gone. John gave her space. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask questions. He just kept showing her she was safe. One evening, he brought a small music player into the room. Soft earth melodies filled the air, calm and peaceful. She blinked. Just once. That was the first sign she heard him. Later, John placed an old tablet on the floor with a basic translator. It had big images, symbols, and words, made for alien children who didn't know human language. He pointed to the word, hungry. She didn't react. He pointed to the word, cold. She looked away. Then he tapped. Name? Silence. But her eyes flicked to the tablet, then away again. That night, John sat on the floor by the wall, far enough to give her space. He began to speak, not expecting answers, just sharing stories. My mom used to say, "No one is born broken," he said gently. "People break others, but we can heal." He talked about Earth, his dog, his favorite soup, and how stars looked different on every planet. The girl stayed quiet, but once, just once, she turned her head slightly as he spoke. It was like a flicker of life inside a dying flame. The next morning, John left clothes on the chair. Soft ones. No chains, no collars, just warm fabric. She didn't touch them, but later, he found the blanket she used before, folded neatly. The clothes were gone from the chair. She was starting to change, but still, she would not speak. Later that day, John tried something new. He brought a small plant from outside, green with tiny blue petals. It glowed faintly in the dark. He placed it near her. This is called starleaf. It only blooms when it feels safe. The girl stared at it for a long time. That evening, John woke from a nap and found something surprising. The plant had bloomed. Bright, full, beautiful. And next to it, the alien girl had placed a single word on the tablet screen. Sorry. John's heart skipped. He didn't know what she was sorry for. Her silence, her fear, her presence. Maybe all of it. He didn't need an explanation. He just smiled and said, "You don't have to say anything. Just be you." Later that night, he stepped outside to breathe in the fresh air under the stars. When he returned, the girl was sitting on the floor, waiting. She tapped the tablet again. This time, a different word appeared. Scared. John sat down slowly, not too close. "Understand," he whispered. She looked up at him, finally, and for the first time he saw her true eyes. Not hollow, not dead, but filled with pain, and the tiniest spark of hope. She opened her mouth. No sound came out at first. Then, a whisper, so soft, he almost missed it. "Luma." John blinked. "Your name?" She gave the smallest nod. That was it. The first bridge between them. Not chains, not commands, just her name. The next day, he printed a small tag and placed it on her shelf. Luma. No longer a number, no longer a thing in a box. She had a name. She had a voice. Even if it still trembled. Name of her own, she had been called object, property, and thing. But when he gently said her name, Luma, it felt like a crack of light inside a sealed dark room. For the first time in her life, someone saw her. The next morning, Luma stood by the window wrapped in soft clothes instead of chains. She watched the twin suns rise over the alien horizon. Birds flew past, strange ones with 4 wings and glowing feathers. She had never seen anything like them before. John walked into the room quietly, holding 2 cups of hot tea. She didn't hide from him this time. He handed her one. She hesitated, then slowly reached out and took it. Their fingers touched, just for a second, but her hand didn't shake. That was new. Over the next few days, things changed. Slowly, like the turning of a planet. Luma no longer sat in corners. She began sitting on the edge of the bed or near the heater. She still didn't speak much, but she listened. And when John laughed, she smiled, just a little. He began teaching her words using simple drawings and gestures. She learned chair, food, sky, and safe. She pointed to her chest once and said, "Luma." John nodded. "Yes, that's your name. It's beautiful." Her cheeks flushed a soft lavender color, her version of a blush. Luma had never been allowed to choose anything before. Not her clothes, not her food, not even her thoughts. But now, John gave her options. "What would you like for lunch? Soup or sandwich?" he asked one day. She stared at both choices for a long time, then slowly pointed to the soup. He smiled. "Good choice." The next day, he showed her 2 plants and asked, "Which one should we keep inside?" She picked the one, with curling leaves that looked like tiny stars. It was the first time she made a decision freely. It wasn't just a plant, it was freedom. That evening, John brought out a small data pad with drawing software. "You can use this to draw anything you feel," he said gently. She took it with both hands, treating it like something sacred. Luma sat down and began to draw, not with skill but with deep emotion. She drew circles, stars, a cage, then a broken chain. When John saw the drawing later, his chest tightened. She was remembering and healing, but not everything was peaceful. One night, Luma woke up screaming. John ran into her room. She was curled on the floor, holding her head, and crying in a language he didn't understand. She looked up at him with pure fear in her eyes. He didn't ask questions. He just knelt beside her, didn't touch her, and whispered, "You're safe. It's just a dream. You're not there anymore." She eventually fell asleep sitting beside him, leaning her head on his arm. That night he stayed awake, watching over her. The next morning, she handed him a piece of paper. It had 2 words written in her shaky handwriting. "Thank you." He smiled, held it gently, and placed it on the wall. "Whenever you doubt yourself," he said, "look at this. You've come far, Luma." She nodded, eyes wet but proud. Later that day, John showed her a mirror. At first, she flinched. She had never looked at her own reflection freely. Mirrors had always been tools of control, used by those who owned her. But now she looked at herself differently. She reached out and touched her reflection. Then, with a small voice, she said, "Luma." John stood behind her and said softly, "Yes, you're not a thing. You're not property. You're a person." That night they sat by the fire. Luma asked a question with her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" John answered without her needing to. "Speak. Because someone once helped me too. And because kindness doesn't need a reason." She didn't reply. But her hand gently reached over and touched his. And for the first time in her life, Luma didn't feel alone. She didn't just have a name now. She was her name. "They want her back." It started with a knock. 3 slow knocks on the metal door. John opened it and stared into the cold eyes of a bounty hunter. "I'm here for the girl," the stranger said. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." John didn't speak. His hand slowly moved near the door's emergency lock panel. The man standing before him was tall, armored in black plates with red-tinted lenses. On his chest was a symbol John recognized, the sigil of the Velrak Syndicate, a shadowy group that dealt in rare and illegal lives. Not people. Products. John stood firm. There's no one like that here. The bounty hunter smiled without warmth. Her DNA pinged 2 days ago. Registered asset Dom L117, female, hybrid, gifted to Baron Drex, without approval from her original owner. John's heart dropped. They're coming for her, the man added. You have 3 days. Then he walked away. That night, John locked every window and scanned the skies. He didn't tell Luma everything, but she sensed the change. She asked softly, Am I being taken? John shook his head. Not if I can help it. But deep down, he wasn't sure. The law was complicated in alien space. To the galaxy's rich and powerful, someone like Luma was still a thing, just wrapped in soft skin and sad eyes. Luma stayed quiet all night. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. But the next morning, John noticed something. She was packing a small bag. Carefully, silently. He stood at the door, watching her. You're leaving, she nodded slowly. If I go, you'll be safe. They won't hurt you. John's voice cracked. You think I saved you just to let you go now? She didn't answer, but her eyes filled with tears. John walked over and gently placed his hand on hers. No, he said. We run together. By sundown, the sky was red. They had only hours to disappear. John pulled out an old hover bike from his storage bay. It was dusty, loud, and barely legal, but fast enough to cross the outlands and reach an old colony where the law didn't stretch. Luma wore a hood and sat behind him. As they drove through the alien desert, wind stung their faces and dust clouded the path. But John kept going, because behind them death was chasing. They reached the outskirts of a farming village, old tech, peaceful people, no scanners. A perfect place to hide. An old woman named Miri, a friend of John's from his soldier. Days welcomed them. She saw Luma's eyes and understood everything without needing words. She stays, Miri said. Anyone tries to take her, they'll have to take me first. Luma smiled for the first time in 2 days, but the peace didn't last long. 3. Bounty ships landed near the village the next night. The skies lit up with red scanner lights. People stayed indoors. John and Luma hid in a storage barn, heartbeats loud in the silence. From outside, voices echoed, "Return the asset and no one gets hurt." John held Luma's hand. She whispered, "Let me go. They won't stop." He whispered, "Then I'll never stop either." Suddenly, something happened that no one expected. The villagers, humans, aliens, hybrids came out, one by one, holding tools, weapons, and farming gear. They stood between the barn and the bounty hunters. "We don't give up children here," Miri said. The leader of the bounty squad hissed. "You're interfering with syndicate business." Miri shrugged. "This land's not syndicate. It's human." And in that moment, the hunters realized if they moved forward, it would become war. They backed off. For now. John knew they wouldn't stop. This was just a pause. "We can't hide forever," he told Luma. "But we can fight, with truth." He made a decision that night. They would travel to the Galactic Assembly, where ancient laws could be challenged, where voices like Luma's could finally be heard. They would risk everything, not just to escape, but to change the system. Luma looked at him, eyes shining. "You believe I matter?" she asked. John smiled. "You're not a thing in a box anymore. You're Luma." Escape into the wilds. The alarm screamed just before dawn. John opened his eyes to red warning lights flashing. "They found us," he whispered. Outside, engines roared. Syndicate hunters had arrived. John grabbed Luma's hand without hesitation. She didn't ask. She didn't panic. She just nodded and ran with him. Barefoot across the cold floor of the barn, Miri stood outside with her old shotgun. Take the back path, through the fire gap. It'll lead you into the wildlands. The what? John asked. The lands no ship dares fly over, she said. No eyes, no rules, just ghosts and beasts. John didn't like it, but he liked what was behind them even less. He nodded. We'll disappear. The wildlands were not on any map. Old stories spoke of broken tech, mutated creatures, and desert storms that could strip skin from bone. But for Luma and John, it was the only road left. They crossed into the wastelands with just a hover cart, food supplies, and a makeshift compass. Luma wore a dark cloak over her body, her white hair hidden beneath a hood. Wind howled as they moved over cracked alien soil. The skies were a sick color, greenish blue with red swirls. The land looked dead, but to Luma, it felt more alive than the cage she once lived in. Days passed. They traveled by night, slept under rocky cliffs, covered their tracks with sand. John told stories under the stars, mostly to keep their spirits up. Luma listened, sometimes adding small details. Her voice was soft but growing stronger. One night, as they huddled in a cave, she touched his arm and whispered, I used to think silence was safe. John looked at her. And now? I think. Your voice makes the silence kind. But safety didn't last. On the 5th day, they heard engines overhead, a drone, black, silent, scanning. John pulled Luma behind a ridge, but it was too late. A red light blinked on her arm. They had been tagged, back when she was a gift, a tracker, hidden beneath the skin. No, John muttered. We have to cut it out. He looked at her. Do you trust me? She took his hand. With everything. In the dead of night, with trembling fingers and the help of a surgical kit, John found the chip buried in her upper arm. Luma bit down on cloth, gripping the dirt. He removed the device carefully. The chip blinked red, then black. He buried it deep under a pile of scrap metal, letting the fake trail lead them away. Luma's arm bled. John wrapped it. She didn't cry. Instead, she said, Now I'm finally mine. But the wildlands had more dangers than drones. On the 6th night, strange eyes glowed in the dark, creatures tall and thin with stretched limbs and echoing clicks. One moved closer. It sniffed the air. Luma stood behind John. Her body trembled, but she stepped forward. She spoke 3 sharp clicks and 1 long hum. The creatures paused. Then, they backed away. John stared at her. What did you say? She smiled weakly. I told them we are not food. The next morning, they found an abandoned research station half buried in sand. It was broken, dark, and filled with dust, but it had solar panels and water recyclers. John got to work fixing it. For a moment, just a moment, they had shelter. Luma drew pictures on the walls with chalk, flowers, stars, and 1 picture of her and John standing together. He looked at it and said, Looks like family. Luma touched the drawing. That's what it feels like. But danger still loomed. A signal pinged on John's old communicator. Someone had found the fake chip and knew it was a trick. They were getting closer again. We don't have much time, John said. Next stop, the council outpost at the edge of the galaxy. If we reach it, they can't touch you. She corrected softly. They can't touch us. The wilds tried to break them, but couldn't. Not the storms, not the monsters, not even the ghosts of Luma's past. Because now she wasn't running alone, and John wasn't just her savior anymore. He was something else. Someone who saw her not as a gift, but as someone who deserved to be free. The chamber was silent. Hundreds of alien eyes stared at her. She stood alone on the raised platform, small, shaking, and unsure if the truth would even matter. But then, from the other side of the court, John stepped forward. and the silence broke. After weeks in the wildlands, they had finally arrived. The Galactic Assembly Outpost stood like a shining tower above the dust and pain of the galaxy, a place where laws were made, where even emperors had to kneel. John and Luma walked in hand, surrounded by peacekeepers, not as criminals, not as runaways, but as witnesses and survivors. John filed an official petition, challenging the ownership of L-117, known as Luma, citing illegal trafficking, inhumane treatment, and the right to live freely as a sentient being. The room went quiet when the name Baron Drex appeared on the case file. Important people didn't like when their secrets were dragged into the light, but John didn't care. He wasn't fighting just for Luma. He was fighting for everyone like her. The trial began. Aliens in silver robes sat in judgment. Council members from dozens of worlds whispered behind glowing visors. The lead judge, a tall being with 3 glowing eyes, looked down at them. Bring forth the subject. The claimed property. Luma stepped up. Her hands were cold, her breath shallow, but she stood tall. The defense came first. A lawyer for the syndicate presented documents, chains of ownership, proof of transactions. She was never harmed, the lawyer said smoothly. She was gifted as a sign of peace between noble houses. John stood up. You don't gift people, you gift things. Whispers filled the room. The judge raised a hand. Silence. Let the human speak. John's voice was firm, but quiet. Was sent to me in a box, afraid, collared. She didn't even know her own name. He paused, but now she does. She's Luma. She has a voice, a heart, a choice. He turned toward Luma. You don't belong in a cage. Then it was Luma's turn. She looked at the judges, then at the crowd. Fear twisted inside her, but John gave her a nod. She took a breath and spoke. I was taken when I was small. They told me my name didn't matter, that I was a thing, a tool, something to be sold. Her voice trembled, but she kept going. I didn't know what kindness was, until he opened that box and said, You're safe now. A silence fell over the court. It was heavy, real. Suddenly, one of the alien senators, a woman with blue skin and golden eyes, stood up. I know her species, she said. They were thought lost, wiped out. But this girl, she's living proof. She turned to the judges. Do not hide behind old laws. This child is a person, and this human gave her back her life. More murmurs. Some judges looked moved. Others looked nervous. Baron Drex himself did not appear, but his name echoed like a curse in the air. The final moment came. The lead judge stood. This assembly finds the ownership claims of Luma void. Gasps filled the room. She is declared a free being. Her identity as Luma is recognized by this court. Then, the judge looked at John. And to the human who risked everything, we grant honorary guardian status. You may remain by her side under protection of galactic law. Luma turned to John. Her eyes flooded with tears, but this time they were not from fear, they were from freedom. Outside the court, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Some called it the trial that changed the system. John didn't care about fame. He only cared about the quiet smile on Luma's face. I'm not afraid anymore, she said softly. You don't have to be, John replied. You're not alone. She squeezed his hand, and for the first time, they walked forward without looking back. From property to partner, she had once been delivered in a sealed box. No voice, no name, no choice. Now she stood beside him, not as a gift, but as an equal. And when the galaxy bowed to the court's ruling, she did something no one expected. She reached for his hand and didn't let go. The stars above the Galactic Assembly sparkled brighter that night. Luma sat beside John on the edge of a small floating platform that drifted quietly above the court's gardens. Alien trees glowed with gentle light. The air, was peaceful. Neither of them spoke for a while. They didn't have to. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move. He just let her rest, safe, for the first time in her life. The news spread fast across the sectors. Syndicate loses slave trial. Alien girl freed after human intervenes. Baron Drex silent as gifted asset wins personhood. But John stayed far from the attention. He had no interest in being famous. He only cared that Luma could finally walk without fear. The next morning, a representative from the Galactic Council offered Luma a choice. You may return to your homeworld. Our ships can take you there. Luma hesitated. My home is gone, she said quietly. They took it from me. The representative nodded. Then we can help you start a new one. But Luma looked at John. I already have. They returned to the quiet planet where it all began. The small workshop. The open skies. The garden John had tried to grow. This time it flourished, with help from someone who had once been too scared to touch sunlight. Luma planted flowers from her childhood memory. She drew symbols from her people on the walls. She laughed, freely. She even rebuilt the box she had arrived in, not to hide in, but to burn. And when the fire turned it to ashes, she whispered, that part of me is over. One evening, she stood in front of John, wearing a long cloth dress she had made herself. I want something more, she said softly. John blinked. More? She reached out and gently placed a hand on his chest. I want to choose. He didn't understand at first, but her eyes explained it all. I want to stay with you, not because I was given, not because I owe you, but because I want to. John's heart pounded. Then stay, he said, his voice raw. Not as someone rescued, but as my partner. They built a life slow and simple. She became more than just a survivor. She helped others, other lost beings, find their voices too. Some called her the girl who walked free. But to John, she was just Luma, the girl who once sat trembling in a box, now laughing in the wind. Years later, during a festival at the colony, a curious alien child asked her, were you really just a gift? Luma smiled gently and knelt beside the child. I was never just anything, she said. I was always someone. I just needed someone else to believe it first. As the sun set behind them, John and Luma stood hand in hand, not master and slave, not rescuer and rescued, but something far stronger. Two souls who found each other when the galaxy had forgotten them both. The end.